Hello, everybody. Thank you for watching. This is the American Doofus Show. Don't be a doofus. I'm your host, Barry Welsh. This is the mid-afternoon update for the 28th, the last day of February in 2022. The focus, as has been for the past several episodes, is the war in Ukraine following the Russian invasion of their independent and democratically elected government neighbors. We begin at the United Nations, where a rare UN Security Council meeting last night voted to call a very unusual General Assembly of the United Nations. The General Assembly means that all countries will be present during the meeting and all countries will have a vote. This is the Russian ambassador.
In recent days, the Ukrainian issue has made headlines, global headlines, and has now been given pride of place at the UN Security Council and now the General Assembly. At the same time, Russian actions are being distorted and thwarted. And there's the number of incredible fakes is staggering with the use with the media outlets and social networks proliferating these lies. For this reason today, I wish to focus on the real reasons for the crisis that has emerged and its possible consequences. I wish to emphasize the following. The root for the current crisis lies in the actions of Ukraine itself. For many years, it sabotaged and flouted its direct obligations under the Minsk package of measures. Just recently, very recently, there was a hope that in Kiev they would reconsider and that they would indeed comply with what they signed on to back in 2015.
So basically, a lot of talk coming out of the United Nations, which we are used to, not a lot of action. And one thing that did come out of that meeting, the Ukrainian ambassador to the United Nations said basically he thinks Putin's trying to kill himself, and if he wants to kill himself, not to use a nuclear arsenal, but to do what the guy did in 1945 in the bunker. So we'll keep monitoring that, but actually not a lot of teeth in the General Assembly. Now you will hear one other thing about the General Assembly. There was people from Poland and people from Ukraine were asked about discrimination of the border, and both sides denied that any refugees were being discriminated against on either side. Of course, we have the receipts for that. You can go back and look at the last episode, and we will be talking more about that. As a matter of fact,
you've seen the situation in Ukraine.
As a matter of fact, we've got a neutral report. Okay, this comes from India, from the India media, and India. Actually, before I show that report, let me go here real quick, because hang on. Okay, I stopped it. There we go. Now, you're going to hear some of the mainstream media in America say the whole world is united against Russia. You'll hear some, and that's simply not the case. The maps show the region. Here's Ukraine. Over here's the eastern part of Moscow. I'm sorry, the western part of Moscow, the eastern part of Ukraine. Moldova and Hungary have both said they will not allow any NATO or European Union or any other aid to come through their territory into Ukraine. Again, that is Hungary and Moldova, both neighbors of Ukraine. Turkey, which we're about to get to, has said it will remain neutral, that it has to have ties, has to maintain ties to both Ukraine and as well to Russia. And then we get over here to China, and China has basically they're calling for peace, but at the same time saying the United States is the one that is really behind all of this, and that's who's fanning the flames of war in their opinion. So we know of a number of countries that are simply not in line with the United States. So when you hear mainstream media say the whole world is united, that's what they do. They use hyperbole and make it seem to us watching their program that it's Russia against the world, and that's a dangerous statement to make, because not only is it not true, but there are a lot of powerful countries that are not lined up against Russia. Now, the denial of access to world finances is hurting Russia, and it's hurting Putin. And as that escalates, he's going to escalate. We got to be aware of that. Those that are looking for an end game, I don't know if you're going to find one, to be honest with you. We're at Flight Tracker now, and okay, again, we've got NCH 0223 call sign of the United States Air Force observation plane down here. And okay, that's a Qatar flight. This is a twin engine, yeah. And that too is so the only surveillance we have up at the moment, as far as knowingly, is right down here, and it originated from Midday. They're keeping an eye on the Russian Navy here in the Black Sea, the Sea of Azov. There was incursions into Mariupol and Melitopol. At the moment, there are numerous attacks going on throughout the country. It is 3:06 p.m. as I'm recording this. We'll be live tonight at 10 p.m., by the way. And air raid sirens have been going off. We'll get to all that in just a minute. But I do want to go back to what I started to show earlier. This is an India, the nation of India. This is how they are viewing what is going on. India, another major nation that is trying to walk a tightrope and maintain ties with both Russia and the United States. So again, when you hear MSN, mainstream media, say the whole world is united against Russia, a lot of the world is, but not all of the world. Far, far from it.
And you've seen how the world is responding. Now let me show you how the world is covering this invasion. I'm talking about the media, especially Western channels. How are they covering Russia's invasion? With blatant racism. Let me say something at the outset. As journalists, we do not filter hardships and pain. We do not see caste, color, or gender. And we have stuck by this principle. When the Taliban stormed Kabul, we stood with Afghans. When Ethiopia attacked its own people, we questioned them. When unarmed Black teenagers were gunned down in the US, we joined the outrage. Today, we are doing the same. We see the plight of the Ukrainian people, and we have reported on their hardships. But what about the Western media? They too are reporting on the crisis, on the war, on the refugees. But they do not see hardships. They only see race, the color of your skin, the color of your hair. Let me show you exhibit number 1. This exchange happened on the BBC, the so-called Guardian of Unbiased Reportage. Listen to how their panel describes the refugees from Ukraine.
It's very emotional for me because I see European people with blue eyes and blonde hair being killed.
People with blue eyes and blonde hair. That is why the so-called expert on the BBC is emotional, not because the people are homeless, not because their country is being invaded, but because their hair is blonde. On social media, a lot of people are defending the BBC. They say it's a guest, not their anchor. Let me take you back to September last year. Another guest was speaking on the very same channel, South Asian expert Christine Fair. She called out Pakistan's links with the Taliban. Do you remember what the BBC presenter did? She shut her down. She said it was violating the channel's unbiased coverage. So exposing terror links is a violation. Blatant racism and white supremacy is fine. Gold standard indeed. Now for exhibit number 2, NBC News from the US. Listen to this.
These are not refugees from Syria. These are Christians, they're whites, they're very similar.
Very similar.
Again, we show you things others aren't showing you. And we're not telling you what to think or how to think, just giving you things to think about. This report, take it with a grain of salt, but let's continue to listen. And what was just said, we know is true. We know it's true. All right, those that watch this show, we're not surprised by racism. We are trying to end it.
To us. How so? Because the Syrian refugees are Muslims, their skin is darker, their hair is not blonde. So Europe does not want them. And remember, this is not being said at some white supremacy cult. This is happening on live television. Exhibit number 3, CBS News, another American broadcaster. Their reporter is appalled by the war, not because there is death and destruction, but because it is happening in Europe.
Like Iraq or Afghanistan, this is a relatively civilized, relatively European city where you wouldn't expect that or hope that it's going to happen.
So Iraq and Afghanistan are uncivilized countries. Their people are uncultured. Their regimes are irresponsible. So they deserve war. They deserve hundreds of bombs and years of occupation. What about Ukraine? According to CBS, no. Ukraine does not deserve war or hardships because Ukraine is civilized. And now for the final exhibit. This one is not from the West. It is from Al Jazeera in Qatar. This anchor simply cannot comprehend the idea of European refugees.
What's compelling is just looking at them, the way they're dressed. These are prosperous, I'm going to use the expression, these are prosperous middle-class people. These are not obviously refugees trying to get away from areas in the Middle East that are still in a big state of war. These are not people trying to get away from areas in North Africa. They look like any European family that you would live next door to.
That reporter is confused about the refugees. They look middle class, they look like Europeans. How is something so bad happening to them? Well, this is what systemic racism looks like. Do you remember the 2015 refugee crisis? Around 1.3 million people sought asylum in Europe. Most of them were from Syria, Afghanistan, and Nigeria. Do you remember how the West reacted? They shut their borders, they herded the refugees like cattle, and they branded them as terrorists. Back then, Western reportage was quite different. Let me show you what the BBC did. They prepared 7 charts depicting the refugee crisis. Let's focus on chart number 5. Which European countries are most affected? Now remember, this war was in West Asia. The bombs were dropping on West Asia, but this was the BBC's big concern. Which European countries are most affected? Now, just to be clear, we welcome what Europe is doing to host Ukrainian refugees. They deserve all the help. Our question is, why just Ukraine? Ukraine is not a member of the European Union. It is not part of NATO. So what explains this level of assistance? Racism. You see, Ukrainians are Europeans, hence they get the red carpet, but Africans and Asians get border crackdowns and refugee camps. Western media is part of the problem, I have to say. They reflect the public mentality, their sense of European supremacy. And the problem is, governments are not doing anything to help. In fact, they're adding fuel to this fire. Let me show you what Bulgaria's prime minister said about refugees. I'm quoting. These people are intelligent. They're educated people. This is not the refugee wave we have been used to. People we were not sure about their identity. People with unclear pasts who could have been even terrorists. That was a European head of state. He's openly calling West Asian refugees terrorists. If this does not expose Western hypocrisy, nothing does. They invaded Asian and African countries. They waged war. They committed war crimes. And when the people fled, they shut their borders. What does this tell you? That refugees were never the problem. That money or borders were not the issue. The issue was race. Think about it.
Think about it. That's what I was about to say. Just giving you something to think about. You're not going to see that probably anywhere else in America. And it is something to think about. All right. We're going to wrap up this afternoon update with a look at what's going on within the country of Ukraine at the moment. According to Newsweek, Russian sites hacked across country to display their war dead. We've talked about this. Up until yesterday, Russia had not acknowledged that there had been any casualties. Russian bodies are currently, the bodies of Russian soldiers, dead bodies of Russian soldiers are currently scattered all across Ukraine. Up until within an hour ago, there was no act by Russia to bring their fallen back. You remember the episode where I showed the mobile crematoriums and how we were appalled at that thought? Just something else to think about. I want to show a couple of other things here before we get into before I get back to paying attention to what's going on and preparing for tonight's live. We'll be live tonight at 10 o'clock. Commander-in-Chief of the Armed Forces of Ukraine is reporting that Russian troops used the Ukrainian flag on the military equipment to gain access to new territories, or even used white flags to fake surrender and then attacking, both of which are violations of international humanitarian law. This is a this is near the border of Belarus. Now, earlier today, this is on the Belarusian side of the border. What you're seeing, what you were seeing was Belarus troops, and I'm going to go back to it in a second. What you're going to see is Belarus troops preparing to join Russian forces. As it says, Belarus armor and infantry entrenched in the Brest region by the Ukraine border. There have been reports that Belarus forces were going to begin full combat operations in Ukraine today. And again, there was a meeting at the border between the meeting at the border was not Putin and Zelensky meeting, okay? It was a delegation of representatives. What happened at the meeting was they decided they were going to they were going to meet again, all right? Russia basically said, surrender. Ukraine said, you must leave and stop the invasion. So neither one are going to do those things. So they went back to their capitals to confer. The only agreement was that would be another meeting. And so with that, I'm going to go back to this video. And you will see along the side of the road, some of them camouflaged, the Belarusian troops. This video, there are, we've talked about this, the controversial idea of the citizens of Ukraine arming themselves. Last night, I mentioned a report that sadly someone in Kyiv who had just simply, he was out of cigarettes and forgot about the curfew. He went outside and was immediately gunned down without any warning by his neighbors. So it's one of those things that on the surface, it seems like, gosh, what patriots out there walking around. And then you see some of the pictures and you realize these people don't know how to handle weapons. I saw one of a guy had his AK-47 over his shoulder with the barrel pointed right to the back of his head, instead of how it's supposed to be worn, so that you can swing it around. You can swing it from your back around to the front and be prepared to shoot with the barrel down at your back. Anyway, watch what happens here. These are again, these are people trying to defend their country. Driving by, throwing a Molotov cocktail, and she didn't get it all the way out the window, and it comes back in on them. So, you know, fighting is for the most part should not be for the untrained. And this was from 7 hours ago. This was shelling in Kharkiv. You can see the explosions as missiles are hitting residential areas. Kharkiv is the second largest city in Ukraine, behind Kyiv. So at the moment, we have air raid sirens going on over Kyiv, over Kharkiv, over Dnipro in the southern district. Actually, let's go and show where Dnipro is. No pro is down here, but it's here we go. I'm sorry, I got the here we go. All right. The Black Sea, the Sea of Azor, and no pro right here. No pro here, fairly inland. Kiev here, biggest city in the capital of Ukraine, and Kharkiv over here. All three are experiencing bombings as this is being recorded, missile attacks, various large explosions being reported throughout the city. I had to check a text there. And we'll have more tonight, 10 p.m. live. So discrimination, racism, they don't take a break during war. Not everybody calls it out, but we got to keep calling it out whenever and wherever we see it, so that if nothing else, we bring awareness. If nothing else, we can make people aware. I want to end with this. Chris and I talked again about 6 weeks ago. We started talking about the possibility of all this happening. And we talked about how Russia has had been part of many coups. Not that the United States hasn't, but at this time, Russia had been involved in many coups, including Mali, and I'm sorry, the rest of them escape me. I've got so much going on in my head at the moment. At any rate, there's a group called the Wagner Group. And the Wagner Group is a private army, mercenaries, if you will, similar to Blackwater here in the United States. Similar as far as entities, not necessarily as far as training or anything like that, just as a comparison. There is a fairly large private army located in the United States, and the Wagner Group, not supposedly, multiple sources confirm that the Wagner Group, which is a Russian private army mercenaries, that they have been deployed into Kyiv, 400 of them, and the goal is simply to assassinate Zelensky. So, as Chris said earlier, the Wagner Group failed in Mozambique, and they appear to be failing in Mali. Let's see if they will be successful here. Keep in mind, Ukraine has its special forces and group like Combat Applications Group, which is similar to our Delta forces. And they have the same skill set as the Wagner Group. We shall see who has the better tactical skill sets. So our hopes are that this ends peacefully and ends soon. That's our hopes. Our common sense tells us that this is not going to end well, no matter how it ends. Not the entire world, but many countries in the world are ratcheting up economic sanctions and beginning to cripple the people of Russia, as well as Putin himself. A CNN reporter went to try to take a subway, and his Apple Card wouldn't work. People lined up block after block after block waiting on an ATM machine, both in Ukraine and in Russia, trying to get money. The curfew was briefly lifted last night, so Ukrainians could go to the stores. And last night, our time, okay? It's currently night in Russia and Ukraine right now. It's 3:26 p.m. as I'm broadcasting, or as I'm recording this broadcast. And so during the day, which was our night, they were out in stores, long lines, shelves all but empty. And we'll be showing some of that tonight at 10 p.m. And until then, we thank you for watching. It's the American Doofus Show. Don't be a doofus. The world gets darker by the day. We need more lights. Try to be a light. Try to be a positive. Try to be a loving. Try to be an accepting. Try to be a human being. Try to remember that we are one race, the human race. We are humankind. Try to be both humane and kind. It's the American Doofus Show. Don't be a doofus. I love you all. Thank you so much for watching.